Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. That music means Jim Geraghty is with us. Follow Jim on X at Jim Geraghty. He's a Washington Post columnist. He's the senior political writer for National Review. He is Big Jim Geraghty. Jim, I want to talk about the big sort. And I think the blue got bluer last Tuesday. Seattle got dark blue. It's the state that went 57% for Harris. And then today I saw Ron DeSantis saying he wants to redistrict Florida to pick up 5 seats for the Republican. Is this sort of what we're condemned to, a blue and a red country?
I think so. And by the way, Hugh, I want to thank you for having me on your program. I know it's been a little while. It's always fun to kick around these sorts of issues with you because I know I'm going to return it for a touchdown. I know you knew this was going to come up, and I just want to point out, Hugh, the Cleveland Browns
I want the draft choice. I want the draft choice.
Since the Rapid City monuments were in the Dark Knight Rises. It's like when the bombs were going off and Hines Ward was going all the way. It's like their defense, like the special teams wasn't even on the field. By the way, after
I'm glad I gave you some joy, but in the end, in April, I'm very happy. Come April, I'll take this. I'll take the loss. But Jim, what about the big sort?
Because you guys need to draft another quarterback. So as for the big sort, I do think it's kind of interesting that you saw this in these two separate cities. New York has always been a big city, right? Seattle had this big boom in the 90s, and it has continued since then. Both tech-driven, and in both cases, housing became phenomenally expensive. In some ways, they were consequences of their success of having lots of people who want to live there. And I have no support for Mamdani. I have no support for this female junior version of Mamdani they elected out in Seattle. But I will make an interesting observation. A lot of the people who were these upset, angry people about Mamdani, they're making in New York City, in some cases, 100,000, 120,000, 150,000, and they still feel poor. They still feel poor because housing is that expensive in that. Now, Ben Shapiro got in trouble about a week ago for saying, well, if you can't afford to live in New York, you probably should go live somewhere else. And everybody thought he was the harshest, meanest guy on earth. With the argument of the Mamdani crowd, and I would point out the Groypers and a whole bunch of the, woe is us, there is no possibility for success in America anymore. They believe that if they can't find the job they want to do, at the salary they want to do, in the location they want to live in, then capitalism has failed, or America has failed, or society has failed them. The thing is, no other generation had it just handed it to them, right? You've always had to make compromises in that case. Sometimes you got to live out in the suburbs. Sometimes you got to have a long commute. Sometimes you got to live in a much smaller apartment than you want to, right? Now, in both of these cases, both Seattle and New York needed to build a lot more housing. And I'm not saying that the people who live there don't have a gripe about the fact that the housing supply has not, expanded to meet the demand. And a lot of this is not in my backyard. A lot of this is environmental regulations. In New York City, you got to buy special types of material. Everything's got to be a union job. None of that makes anything less expensive. But the short version is, we are going to have bluer blue parts and redder red parts. And, I guess a few places of the country, like, Virginia, where I'm living, seemed purplish, and now we just elected a whole bunch of Democrats. Policy here is probably going to swing very far to the left. That's going to be very bad. There were 7 swing states last year. I think Georgia, North Carolina, like Arizona, some of these places might be competitive. But you're right. If you're on the coast or if you're in a deep red state, you're probably going to get policies heading even further in that direction for the next couple of weeks, or the next couple of years.
Now, how much of this are they entitled to feel, Jim, younger people, about the boomers, of whom I am one and you are not? I think you're Gen X. But
yes.
Build more homes. I wrote my friend Andrew Del Rey, who runs andrewandtodd.com, mortgage bankers. I said, what do you think about the 50-year mortgage? He said, not my recommendation for anyone. We are between 7 and 10 million homes short in America, and that's because of the NIMBY environmentalism, boutique, local government, not my backyard, as you mentioned, boomerism of 20 years. They do have a right to be angry about that. We did not let the market work.
That is correct. And that's the thing, is what we have here are usually regulation problems and government problems. And for a whole bunch of these people, again, mostly on the left, but some on the right, look at this and say, aha, this is a capitalism problem. By the way, I've seen people make the argument that this is an illegal immigration problem. These illegal immigrants are living somewhere, but I generally don't think that illegal immigrants are living in the houses that that you'd like to live in. And also, illegal immigrants, with rare exceptions, don't vote. So largely, these are people who are like, I have mine. I have my happy house. I don't want you to be able to build a bigger house. I don't want you to build low-income housing down the street. I don't want you to. My understanding is that in Texas, pretty much you can build whatever you want on your property. That's why you end up having the church right next to the strip club, right next to the vape shop, right next to the Bible store, right. You get all kinds of crazy combinations.
And then $400,000 condos. I'll tell you, Jim, next year, you heard it here first. It's our 250th birthday year. It's also going to be the 100th anniversary of the worst decision in Supreme Court history, Village of Euclid versus Ambler, which allowed zoning to be constitutional, which our framers would have absolutely hurled over because it tells you what to do with your land. And as a result, we have a housing shortage. And the only way to get out of that anywhere is to build more, not rent control. Everyone who's got a rent control apartment loves it until they call I'll give you the last word. It's not rent control. It doesn't work.
Sure. LA just enacted one of the strictest rent control laws that is basically going to ensure they cannot increase the rent at a level commensurate to inflation. So while they think, we just did something very nice, we made the rent go up less. Yes, you also made a huge disincentive for anybody else to build more housing because they cannot increase the rent as the demand increases. By the way, I used to be the kind of person who got annoyed by the construction of luxury condos. I used to live in Washington, D.C. And, I lived in a small place with a roommate. Then I moved in with the woman who ended up becoming my wife. And I had this thing like, they don't build any more affordable housing. They're building these luxury condos. They stay unoccupied for 6 months to a year. If only these idiots would build them. And what somebody pointed out is that those luxury condos do eventually get filled up. And then leave empty up spaces in other places where all of a sudden now there's demand for that one. So even if you're kind of annoyed that people, if you built lots of luxury housing, even that would help the problem gradually and eventually. Because we just got to start building stuff everywhere. And of course,
30 years as a land use lawyer, housing is one market. From the studio apartment that is the cheapest to the most expensive Manhattan condo, it's all one market. Jim Geraghty's Morning Jolt. You should be listening to the editors in the Two Martini Lunch. Stay tuned. I'll be right back. Thank you, Jim Geraghty. Follow him on X at Jim Geraghty. Follow me to the next segment.